All right. It looks like we are live. How is everybody doing? I'm so pumped to be here. My name is Chris Benke. We're going to get officially started in just a second, but I've got on this live cast two amazing men that I really, really appreciate both of them and excited to talk to them about. We've got Ed Rush, who is a former F-18 fighter pilot. We'll do an intro here in a minute. And we've also got Bobby Hobby, who's a senior leader at Eagle Mountain Apostolic Resource Center. And today we're going to be digging into something that, I mean, if you're on this, you probably saw the title and you know it's a pretty rad title. When the impossible becomes the mission. And I can't think of anyone in the world that I know better to talk about that than Ed Rush. But before we actually kick this thing off, I want to make sure everybody has a second to get on. So put in the comments where you're watching us from, and we'll get started in just a minute. But before we get started, Ed, how are you doing? Bobby, how are you guys doing?
You want me to go first? So first, hey guys, listen. When I do these interviews, a lot of times, I jump on and it's somebody that I haven't really met. We're doing this interview together, but this is really extraordinary because we have history together, and it's good history. So I spoke at an event at Eagle Mountain. Then we did two of my events at Eagle Mountain. You're producing my next event. I'm speaking at next event for you. We spent time together, hung out together, had coffee together. So I'm excited because we know each other. And that's not really normal. For those of you who do interviews or podcasts like this, normally you're kind of like just meeting the person. But we got the good and the bad and everything in between. So I'm really excited about this. I consider you guys family. And we've had a beautiful run together. I'm so excited to see where God's leading you and certainly where God's leading me. And today we're going to talk about a topic that I believe is near and dear to God's heart, which is the impossible. I'll jump up on the whiteboard in a little bit and talk about this, but God's calling people to some extraordinary things. And sadly, many of God's people are going, no, I'm just a plumber or whatever. And the only thing you can't do is say no. The thing you need to do is what Isaiah did, where he's like, look, I'm down here, pick me, so we're going to talk about that today.
That's good. That's good. Bobby, how are you doing back there in Bend?
Yeah.
Beautiful Bend, Oregon.
It is beautiful. The weather's gorgeous. I'm super excited about this topic as well because I know that there's people watching that you were created for the supernatural, and you know that in this hour, God's calling you to do something that's way bigger than your superhuman strength, right? And that is the key to jump into the supernatural. And so I appreciate Ed because he lives that way. He teaches people how to jump in to make the impossible possible. And what seems to be in the last season, something that was way bigger than you, because we all are supposed to be living way bigger than what we think our call is. And all of a sudden, that thing that seemed unreachable is now the new norm. And then we're reaching for higher heights. So some of you live this way and you're going to be super encouraged today. Some of you have been resisting it and you've been wondering why this thing is definitely too hard. And you're going to learn keys today that this is actually God setting you up to live a supernatural lifestyle. So let's do it.
Come on. That is super good. We're going to get this thing kicked off in just a second, but I see some amazing people in here. Ed, you've got some serious fans in our comments here. Like, this is pretty cool. Like,
I didn't even pay them to show up or anything. They just showed up.
Not even $1. That's amazing. Several people, it looks like several people saw you at KCIA. Several people have attended your events. So Teresa, Kathleen, Christy, Jennifer, Ann, Brett, Julia, Mark, Randall, Susan, Rebecca, Linda, Rosemary, Lee, Loran, Catherine, Earl, Holly, Ashley, and Lex, and there's more and more. You guys, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. This will not disappoint. This will not disappoint. I think we should kick this off. You guys want to just kick this off? I think we've waited long enough. Like, let's
do it.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's get into it right now. Hey everybody, my name is Chris Benke. I'll be hosting this live cast, and I'm very excited about this one. Just if nothing else, I get to hang out with two of my favorite people, Bobby Hobby, who's a senior leader at Eagle Mountain Apostolic Resource Center, and Ed Rush, who's a former F-18 fighter pilot, an actual legit, not joking, legit Top Gun guy, like the movie, but for real in real life. So you're going to have some amazing strategy with Ed. Ed also has written several books. I've read two of them, and they are both really fantastic. So I'm excited to get into this topic because the topic that we've chosen for today is when the impossible becomes the mission. And I feel like it's super easy for people to say things like, God's doing the impossible, but when God sets things up in a way, and I personally feel like he often does, that it's actually not possible without him, you're
Mhm.
kind of set up for something incredible. So I want to just jump right into it. Ed, Bobby, how are both of you guys doing?
Doing great.
It's
Excited to
awesome.
be here.
It's awesome to be here, man. I feel like it's a family reunion at this point.
It
So,
is. It
so
is. I think we were brainstorming about getting this topic and doing a live cast and kind of talking about this upcoming event that we'll get to at the end. And we started talking about, well, what could we go after with Ed? That Ed has a lot of actual, real, practical experience with, and what are people being called to from the Lord right now? And one of the things we talked about is it seems like a lot of people feel like what God's asking them to do is impossible. Like jump across the Grand Canyon, just do it. It's going to be fine. But the thing is that from what I've heard Ed speak, what I've read from his books, and what I know of him, he's actually been faced with situations before where it's actually impossible without the supernatural, and it's actually feels for sure impossible. And so I think this is an amazing topic. I'd love to just dive into it. Before we get going, Bobby, do you have any thoughts or any kind of setup that you want to do?
Just as an opener, you guys, I'm super excited about this. We had been talking about this next level of Christianity and what God's saying to us in this new era. And I just feel like there's people that are watching right now. You're just going to be blessed today by what Ed has to bring, what we're going to sort of talk through. And if you're wondering, gosh, Lord, I know that you've been speaking to me about something that's beyond my capacity. This is for you. Some of you, you've lived beyond your capacity in the supernatural for years,
Yeah.
and you understand what we're talking about. And there's something for you today, just to encourage you. Listen, that's how God has been training you for what's coming. And Ed's going to talk to this today. I'm going to speak to it today. But listen, I just want you to be encouraged. The Lord is setting you up to live your best life, and that requires the supernatural. Your calling is way bigger than you could pull off. He knows that, and he set you up for success.
Come on. Come on. Well, Ed, I think when you say things like, when the impossible becomes the mission, you are the perfect person to talk about that. So with that title, what are your initial thoughts? Like, let's
yeah,
dig.
awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, here's the thing. So, definitionally, by the way, as you're watching today, I want you to grab a pen and just take some notes. And I would love it if you put some of those notes in chat. I see Lex and Lisa and Carolyn and Jerry and Kathleen. What's up, Kathleen? Good to see you. And Lex, I have a phone call with you in about a week and a half. It's going to be awesome. Linda and Tansy and Mary and so many other folks. Just what I would love for you to do right in the chat feature, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching, just put down your big takeaway. By the way, the first one is this. Definitionally, the word impossible means it's just something that hasn't been done yet. Okay. So when it comes to a definition, it just hasn't been done yet. And I want you to think about it like this. Right now, scientists tell us that the speed of light essentially is the speed limit. If you follow Einstein or even Newtonian physics, they simply just say that the speed of light, is no one will ever go faster than that. And I can tell you that that's definitely not true. And the reason I can tell you that's not true is because every other time in history someone said something like that, it completely was broken. Like, for example,
Right.
John Glenn in Glamorous Glennis broke through the sound barrier, which up until that point they believed was so hard, like a rock wall, that nothing could ever fly through that. And now in my F-18, like when I flew in the Marine Corps in my F-18, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this. There were times when I was flying in a big intercept or a big training mission or even in combat where I looked down And unbeknownst to me, I had gone through Mach 1. No noise, no sensation in the airplane, literally, boom, straight through. Now the people around me heard it. Okay, it was a very violent moment for them. But as far as me in the airplane, I barely even noticed that. Think about the difference between when John Glenn did that in the 60s and all the way until now, when the technology allows us to take an airplane like the Concorde and fly supersonic. So impossible is nothing more than what hasn't been done yet. Now, I'm going to share a vision that the Lord gave me several years ago, and I believe it was a vision of the past. But I'm going to share it with you because it's I think the single most important thing that God's calling his people to right now. And the vision was like this. I saw the Lord. I actually saw his eyes, and he was flying over the earth. And basically, it was like this dark, sort of like dusk field to the earth. And what he was flying over were fields. If you've ever flown over the Midwest, when there's just these like fields, square fields all over the place, it was like that. And in God's hand, he had this massive bag of seed. And what he was looking for was the place to put the seed. And he's flying, and there's this dirty, cracked field, and there's other ones, weeds all over the place. There's another one that's just all rocks, and he just keeps flying, and he's looking actually at his field, like all of his property. And as he's looking, there's no place to put the seed. And so what he does is he goes off to another piece of property that doesn't belong to him, and he goes and plants his seed there. Now, look, first of all, I know God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and he owns everything. But the vision that God was showing me was that he had things that he wanted to give to his people, and his people were either not prepared or they were pushing away the gifts that God was sending them. And so God chose other people. Now, here's a fundamental fact which is really important for you to know. God wants the world to move forward. God wants technology to improve. God wants your life to get better and everyone else's life to get better. God is in the innovation business. And if his people aren't willing to receive it, God will move on to something else. So I'm going to say something that may sound shocking. I was on an interview last week, literally, with the person you're going to interview next, which is Chris Valentin. And I said the following phrase, and after I got done saying it, Chris said, I could get in trouble for saying this, but you're right. And the phrase was this: Elon Musk. In the past 18 months, Elon Musk has thought more like a kingdom-minded person than most kingdom-minded people, because what he understood is that kingdom oftentimes means acquisition. Kingdom oftentimes means owning the ground. And God has blessed that man. And part of the reason God's blessed that man is because he's expanded his ability to think about what's possible, and he's willing to push the needle on that. I know that sounds crazy. I know his lifestyle and his belief system aren't in line with what we believe, but one way or another, God is going to move the world forward, and it might as well be with you. Okay, so I'm going to jump up on the whiteboard and just kind of talk about impossible for a second. But before I do that, in maybe 30, 45 seconds, Chris, I'm just going to pause for just your thoughts and reaction, Bobby, as well. But let me just say very, very clearly that God is calling you to something big. God is calling you to something extraordinary. It's bigger than you, and it's bigger than what you can think. I was praying. Some of you saw me up in Flagstaff at the KCIA event. And as I was walking into that event, God gave me this vision for the attendees of the event. And he gave me an activation and an impartation to give them. And the activation impartation was expansion. I actually saw the attendees' minds, their heads expanding 3 times the size that they currently were. You ever seen one of those balloon people where their heads it was like that. Their heads were so big that they could barely hold them onto their shoulders. And what God wanted me to do was expand their thinking, their ability to take in what God has for them. And the reason why is simple. If you look across the world right now, we are in a bad shape. We have a government who does not love God. And frankly, they don't love you either. And that's both sides of the aisle, just so you know. I mean, there are awful people in leadership across the board. I'm sure there's some wonderful people there. I'm not criticizing everyone, but our government is screwed up. Our education system is screwed up. Media, arts, government, all of the spheres of life, the business that we are supposed to be in are essentially being run by people who do not love, acknowledge, or know God. And that's a major issue. And so the issues that we're having, one day I was sitting in my little chair. I have this little prayer chair over here, and I was just sitting there with God. It was 2016. I think it was 2015. I was sitting in the chair and I was complaining. You ever do that? You ever complain? Isaiah 40 says, the Lord is in his heaven. Why would you complain? But I was complaining. But at least I was complaining to God. Like, if you're going to complain, you might as well go to God with it. And I was like, Lord, the government's so screwed up, and the taxes. And like, I was upset. And I was lamenting with the Lord, and God spoke to me very clearly, and He said, "Well, that's not your fault." And I was like, "I know it's not my fault. It's their fault. The people that horrible people." And then God said, "But it is your responsibility." And so I like, oh wait, wake up really quickly, and I stopped complaining, started trying to be a solution to the problem. So anyway, I'm going to jump on the whiteboard. While I do that, over to you guys real quick for just some thoughts or reaction, and then we'll keep cranking.
Yeah, so I love referencing Elon Musk because he's super offensive to a lot of people because of the way he carries himself. But just imagine what it would be like if the church wasn't 10 years behind, but we were 10, 20 years ahead. Like if we really saw ourselves with the way kind of the ideals and the mindset of someone like Elon Musk and that kind of thing. Like think about the difference we would see. Think about the differences that we would have if we just realized that God has provided and created solutions for every single problem that we're ever going to face before the foundations of the earth. Like he's already thought about all of that. Like everything would shift. It would just be crazy. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, I love those thoughts, Ed. The kingdom of God is all about expansion, and expansion requires innovation. I love that you said that. And I love that Christians need to get that. And there have been people throughout history that do get kingdom concepts, even though they don't have kingdom character. And the Lord uses that and part of the push for Christians is like, hey, listen, if they're getting this, how much more can you get this? So
Right, right.
love it.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
good.
look at it this way. So if you had let's say you had a very prosperous, multi-billion-dollar business, like a Home Depot kind of thing, or Lowe's, or Whole Foods, like you had this massive company, and tens of thousands of employees, and billions of dollars. And let's say you had three kids who you loved, and as they grew up, they simply were unable, through their own training, through their own failures, or whatever it was, to be able to shepherd that business. If you were the CEO of that company, you would pass the reins on to a person who was not from your lineage, not because you didn't love your kids, but because you had a stewardship mindset around the company, and that happens all the time. However, if you had a son or a daughter, or all of them, who grew up and understood, wow, my dad is in charge of this amazing company, and I care about my dad, and I care about this company, and I care about the employees and the vision of this company, and you grew to understand, you worked in the company, and you started working your way up, and next thing you know, your dad looks at you and says, hey, it's time for you to take over. You're going to be the CEO. That's what God's doing. He's simply stewarding, like we talk about stewardship. He's simply stewarding the ideas of the earth. And if he had to choose, he would choose his kids. That's first choice. If they're not there, he'll move on. And your job, by the way, is to do, I mentioned this in the intro. Isaiah was like, he's like, God's in his temple. The train of the robe fills the temple. So this massive thing. And Isaiah's like, I'm here. I'm down here. That's your job. I'm here. I'm here, Lord, whatever it is. Okay. And that whole mind expansion, we should pray before we get off. Just this a blessing for you with regard to that expansion of the mind. I'm just going to give you like 3 really quick keys to be able to do this. And hopefully as I do this, I give you a sense of an understanding about the prophetic and how God moves in this realm too, because it's really, really important. And I'm going to address a challenge that frankly we don't talk about much, but we should. And it's this. Let's say, let's say for argument's sake, you get a prophetic word. You're at church. You're in the prayer line. Maybe a pastor comes and speaks to you. Maybe someone says something to you, and let's say it's about money. Okay, so let's just go directly at that. Let's say someone speaks to you a word from God, and they say, "Hey, wealth is coming your way," or maybe they say God's going to turn you into a millionaire. So you get this word, and if you're familiar with receiving words like this, the first thing that happens whenever you receive that is you get hope. And by the way, that's natural. That's a very good thing. So God speaks something through someone. You hear that. You hear the word, and the first response is typically hope. You're like, oh, that's great. I've been praying for that, or I've been hoping for that. Okay, now, way over here, and we'll just call this the prophetic arc. Way over here in your life, or in your business, or more importantly, in your bank account is the result, right? So God says, you're gonna be, let me move this a little bit, just a little bit. There we go. God says you're going to be a millionaire, speaks through someone. You receive that word, you get hope. Eventually, it turns into a result in your life, and that's the natural, normal way that this should begin to happen. Now, there are some things along the way that are essentially required. I'm going to talk about what those are in just a second. But the topic that we don't like to talk about is what happens if you receive this and then nothing happens. I know I've had words like that, and I'm sure you have. And we don't talk about this much. And I understand why it's a difficult topic to talk about, but it's one that we should talk about because this is happening. Okay, so God speaks to someone and says, "Hey, you're going to receive wealth," and that person receives that. They get hope. Then that doesn't happen. And if you understand what Proverbs says, it says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick." Okay, so there's this negative part to hope. Now, what often happens in the church community, after receiving a word and it not coming to pass, is this very same person will go back into the prayer line at church, go back to connect with the prophet, and ask for another word. And when they receive that other word, they're going to get the word, then they're going to get hope, and they end up in this desperate, dashing cycle. Now, here's why this happens, and I'm going to go directly at this. If God says to you, "I'm sending wealth your way," and that hope is stirred up inside of you, and then he begins to send it your way. But if as he's sending it your way, and here's the thing, by the way, 99.9% of the time, 99.9% of the time, God uses the normal, or even I should say natural ways to send you wealth. Okay. By the way, there's a small percent. I mean, there is a percentage. I have literally seen money miracles where money did actually just show up. Okay. So God does that sometimes. Sometimes God just supernaturally does that. I'm not denying that. I think it's amazing when he does that. But most of the time, if God's going to send you wealth, he's going to send it through means. For example, there's several companies that I've invested in. I've created books. I create products and do events. And like, there's normal means by which God is blessing me with wealth. Okay. And by the way, this is a gift. It's more than just natural. This is also supernatural. When you have a business or an offering, or you work in a career place, when you receive money for that sort of thing, like when I receive money for my books, or for my events, or for my products, or for my trainings, or for my coaching programs, or my certification programs, when I receive wealth for that, I'm blessed. But also, I'm blessed because I'm a blessing to someone else. People give me the money. Just so you know, people aren't like one of my training programs is a $4,000 training program. It's a God Talk certification. I teach people how to use God Talks, what I teach as a coach, and I teach them how to make money doing it. Literally, I've had people do $5,000-$10,000 deals using this methodology. Okay, when I teach, they give me $4,000 for that. When I teach them that, I'm teaching them how to do deals at $5,000. So it takes one deal for that person to make their money back, and then everything else is theirs to keep. So they feel like they got a great deal. I feel like I get a great deal. I'm blessed to be a blessing. So when money comes to someone, normally it comes through the normal means. It comes through the normal ways of God. You invest in a company, you grow your wealth. You learn how to invest, like, you create a product or a service or write a book. That's the normal means. Now, if you grew up like I grew up, learning that, money is the root of all evil, or money doesn't grow on trees, or money will make you into a bad person. If God starts to send you wealth, like for example, let's say you have a business like mine where you sell products and services and events. If God starts to send you it, you will subconsciously push it away. Because if you think money's evil, which it's not, by the way, it's simply amoral. It's just like a gun. Okay, it's how the person's using it, right? If a person has a good heart, the money's going to expand their ability to be good. If a person has an evil heart, their money's going to expand their ability to be evil. I had people come up to me all the time because I teach about this a lot, and they go, "Gosh, I don't want money to turn me into a bad person." I'm like, well, if you're a bad person now, money will expand your ability to be awful. But if you have a good heart, if you love God, if you're on this training, listening to this because you want to hear from God, money is simply going to expand your ability to be good. And why, by the way, why would you ever worry? Think about this for a second. Why would you ever worry about a gift from God becoming evil? Like, I have a 4-year-old daughter. I just gave her a Lego car and a puzzle for her birthday. Okay. She just turned 5. So I guess I should say I have a 5-year-old daughter. I gave her a Lego a car and a little puzzle because that's what she loves to do. Okay. When I gave her that, my daughter didn't go, God, Dad, I love the puzzle and the Lego, but I don't want this to turn me into a bad person. 5-year-olds don't think like that. They're just like, give me the car, okay? I don't even think she said thank you. She thanked me by the way that she acted, okay? So here's the thing. If God wants to give you money, you let him. If God wants to send you blessing, you let him. You stop pushing it away. And so what happens is, in between the word and the result, the first thing is you get your mind straight about what God's saying to you. If God says he's going to bring you money, then what you do is you start to begin to ask him, what lies do I believe about money? What's true about money? You literally physically recode your mind about money. That's, by the way, a lot of you already have this book because I saw you in chat. If you've not read God Talks is a book about asking God about your software coding that happens in your brain and physically rewiring your brain to be able to receive what God has for you. By the way, this is faith. If God says he's bringing you money, training your brain to be able to receive it is actually faith. One of the first times the word faith ever shows up, it says Abraham believed God and it was credited him to him as righteousness. God said, you're going to have a son. And Abraham is in his 90s, and everything he knew, all the logic, by the way, logic's wrong a lot of the time. Reason's wrong a lot of the time because they counteract with faith. So reason and logic would have told Abraham, there's no way you're going to have a son, but God told him. And the gift that God gave Abraham when he believed him, when he put his mind around what God had was righteousness. So if you want an extra step on this, if God says something to you, train your mind to be able to faithfully receive whatever it is that God has you. And the reward for that is righteousness. Then the next thing, so God gives you the word, you train your mind. The next thing you do is you train your skill set. Okay. Now, this is something we don't talk about a lot either. So like, for example, let's say I just did this event and I had this woman sitting in the second row. And I don't know if you've ever spoken before, but if you're like me and you're like prophetically connected and you're doing business events, a lot of times God will just start to speak to you in the middle of your training about the person in the second row. And sometimes you're like distracted by it because God's like, say this to her, And so I just stopped and I said, Christine, I said, I see you speaking in front of thousands of people. Most of them are women. I see you speaking to these big women's events and impacting people and changing people's lives. Turns out this woman, by the way, was a very influential executive coach in one of the biggest companies in the world. Literally, you have this company on your Apple TV, okay? And God's calling her out of the executive world to be able to teach and train women leaders and speak in front of thousands of people. And by the way, she's barely never spoken on a stage before. So God's not, generally speaking, God's not going to plop her onto a stage in front of 1,000 people. The next step for her is to get trained. What does that mean? If God gives you a word that you're going to be an author, well, learn how to write good books, learn how to tell stories and how to connect your chapters and create open loops and get people to move into the second chapter, right? If God says you're going to be a speaker, well, go get some training. Learn how to communicate, how to tell stories, how to be funny on the stage, how to move on the stage, how to use PowerPoint or like flip charts like I use, how to connect your skill. Go start speaking in groups of 30, 40, 50 people. Make some mistakes like I did. I tripped onto 3 stages in my life. I walked up on the 2 stages with my zipper down. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've said a lot of dumb things, but it was just all training. I got to learn how to be able to do this so that I can do what I'm doing right now a lot more freely. And then when you get your mind right, you got the word from God, your mind right, you got the skill, then the result begins to come. Okay. And that's how you connect the word. So if you want to understand how to do the impossible, this is where it's at right now. And I'll give you an example I'll just give you one example. And actually I have more than one example, but I'll give you this one because it's just helpful to think through this. So one day I was sitting in my little chair, like I sit there and just sort of enjoying God. And I was dreaming and I put 100 numbers with little dots down the side of my journal. And I said, today I'm going to dream with God. I'm going to come up with 100 ideas on 100 dreams, 100 things that I want to be able to accomplish before my life is out. And I started writing them down, about my business and wealth and kids and influence. And I got to 27. And when I hit 27, I ran out of ideas. And I was like, man, that stinks. 27, I should have 100. I made a list of 100. I only got to 27. So 28, I pulled out my little journal. I said, 28 is I want to dream bigger things. And at that point, God just said, hey, look, the rules are off. You just dream however you want to dream. And so I realized I didn't need to make these didn't need to be realistic. So the first thing I wrote down was I want to be able to fly without the use of an airplane or, like any device, like Superman did. Of course, that's an impossible dream, right? But I wrote it down anyway. Second dream, I said I want to be influential in solving cancer. Third one, I want to be able to colonize a planet. The fourth one, which would basically be like the 32nd one on the list, I want to be able to speak in my language and have someone else hear me in their language. Like, you know how Peter in Acts 2, he's like speaking and they all heard him in the other language. Okay. And I'm starting to write these things down. And that was about maybe 5-7 years ago. And I just let that list go. So it was about a week ago. I was on the phone, or I was on Zoom with a very dear friend of mine. This is one of the most influential people in the business world. He wrote a book which essentially is bringing creation and scientific biological evolution together. Okay, not Darwinian evolution, but the kind of evolution that happens in your stomach when bacteria resist antibiotics. And what he realized as he was writing this book, he's an entrepreneur, by the way, is that the approach to cancer is completely wrong. The approach to cancer is a Darwinian approach that says basically these are really dumb cells, so let's just blast it with chemicals and radiation. But a creative understanding of the way the Lord's created things is that cells know what they're doing. And if you start to treat cells like they know what they're doing, you treat them differently. And he has developed this technology with a researcher where they can literally find the first cancer cell. It's groundbreaking, by the way. And I'm on the phone with this guy because he wants my advice. And we spent an hour together working through a bunch of ideas regarding this project. And then we spent like 3 hours together here in San Diego working through this project. And in the middle of it, I realized, wait a second, I wrote on my impossible list, I want to be influential in solving cancer. Next thing you know, I'm in the middle of advising a person who literally has got a trajectory within the next few years to where this is going to be a thing. And I thought, man, isn't that crazy? I wrote that down as one of the impossible things. I used to say that from the stage. I say, well, I want to be influential, and the audience would laugh. And I always tell people, if you're sharing your dreams and the audience doesn't laugh, your dreams aren't big enough. So anyway, back to you guys real quick. I've got one other quick story to share, but over to you for just some thoughts on that.
Super good, man. This is awesome. Okay, so word, skill, and results. I hope you're all hearing that. I just want to champion what Ed is saying. Word, skill, and results. Part of what we do is train people to put apostolic feet to prophetic hope. And that's exactly what we're saying today. I'm crying out, Lord, do something. And he's like, do something, Bobby. And I'm like, Lord, do something. And he's like, you do something. And I've been in those moments so long to where I can tell when there's an insecurity that's trying to pop up and I just want daddy to step in for me. And there's moments when that happens, but often there's something that needs to happen in the brain. When you take that word that you've received, like Ed said, and you put it to prayer and proclamations, it starts coming out of your mouth. You literally start developing a language so that your future is being created by what's coming out of your mouth. Yeah. I love that. And I found that something happens in the brain when we do that. Something starts firing. Your neurons start firing on a whole new level when you actually say what you're seeing. Yeah. And this has awakened your brain on a whole new level to arrive at where you're headed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that one of Satan's great tricks is to make us devalue the power of our words. But if you think about it, words were the cause of every single thing. Like, let's just say you're driving through a city. You drive through a city and you look at a building and you're like, wow, that's an amazing building. That building started with somebody saying, hey, what if we built a building here? Or what if we built a building with this new kind of structure? Like, every single thing, God created everything else, all of the universe, everything through his word. So like, the words that we use are the most powerful tool that we have. They affect our own mindset and we devalue them all the time. And I think that, like what you're saying, Ed, is so important, even though sometimes people are like, oh, that's so good, I like what he's saying. No, like, literally, like, this is the thing that will shape and carve and change the trajectory of people's lives for real. That's what we've seen over the last several thousand years through all humanity. That is the power that our words have and the weight that they should have. We don't take it seriously enough, like we should, honestly.
Yeah, so just a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, over the last year, God has stuck me in some rooms with some of the most influential leaders in the world If I mentioned the folks or even their ministries, you'd immediately know who they were. And I was in a meeting, and I'll just be anonymous about this, but it was one of the most prominent leaders in one of the most prominent churches in the world. And they had invited me to come up because they wanted me to give them some strategy, which is what I do best, to connect God's word to actual execution. Everybody works differently, by the way. I know some people who are just prophets, and that's not who I am. I'm more like a king in the way that I operate. So like if I've got a word for someone, this happens to me a lot. Like I have a coaching session today with one of my clients. If I have a word for someone, it's almost automatically connected with some strategy. That's the way I operate. So I'm in a room with these folks, and I start to unfold some strategy. And as I begin to unfold this, all of a sudden I start to encounter some resistance. And I'm used to seeing that. That happens a lot in the work that I do. I can see where people's barriers and blocks are. It's just one of the gifts God's given me. And I was like, hey, what's up? We're talking about this, but you're not grabbing hold of it like I thought you might. And they just said, who are we to be able to do something so great as this? I mean, we're just regular people. And I said, well, first of all, don't you ever use the word just in a sentence ever again. And what I told them, I'll tell you, which is this. I said, the biggest challenge you have right now, it was a couple. I said, the biggest challenge you have right now is you see yourself like down here somewhere, and God sees you like way up here. And I don't see you quite as high as God sees you because he's got eternal vision. So I see you like right here. I said, so if you're not going to see yourself as God sees you, at the very least, see yourself as I see you. I was at an event one day. Actually, we're up at Eagle Mountain doing an event last July. There was a woman, Chris, like Bobby, who you have that bottom area where it's like wood floor. She's way in the back on the right. I'm in the middle of teaching, and I literally look at this woman and I go, God's calling you to be a leader in the education space. In fact, I see you leading thousands of people in education and being one of the most influential people over the next 20 years to transform the educational system in our country. And it was kind of out of the blue. I didn't even know the woman's background. I think I had an idea that she was somehow a teacher or something like that. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, first of all, thank you for that. Kind of took me off guard. I'll listen to the recording. And she said, the only issue is, she said, I'm just like a homeschool mom. How could I ever be influential? And I looked at her and I said, don't you ever use the word just in a sentence ever again. It's the same thing I tell people all the time, because here's the thing. It's like this. She saw herself here. God saw her here. And I saw her and I was like, look, why don't you at the very least see yourself as I see you? And here's the thing. That word, that parable that Jesus tells about the word just sort of hitting the ground and the birds taking it away, or it not taking root. A lot of times what happens is a word like that comes in and the person immediately goes, oh, I can't do that, and here's why. And the word goes flying out the window. Listen, let it stick around long enough for at least the roots to develop. God will begin to train your subconscious mind to start to receive things. You'll start to get alignments. He doesn't take people like, he didn't even take David. Like David was a kid who could have been king as soon as he whacked Goliath. And even so, God began to train him to be able to receive what he was having. By the way, one other story about that little list. So I had a woman. Remember I said on the list that I wanted to be able to speak in my language and people hear me in their language. So at one of my events, I had this woman, like back row kind of thing, and I had just started the event, and she's like waving her hand, and she wants the microphone, okay? And like Bobby, Chris, and we've done a lot of events. You guys have done a lot of events. Between us, we probably have thousands of events under our belt, okay? So just so you know, if you're familiar with the event space, or even if you're not, you don't give people microphones, okay? Especially like in the beginning of an event, She's like, can I have a microphone? Can I have a mic? Oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what she's going to say. You never know. And so finally I couldn't like ignore her. And the audience is like, can you give her a microphone? So I handed her a mic. Okay. So she stands up and she goes, everyone, I just need to say this before the event. I'm looking for the side door. She's like, I got to say this before the event starts. This man right here. Oh my gosh. What's coming next? She goes, this man, you listen to him. What he says is right. She said, the last event, Ed, you said, and she said something that I apparently had said. She said, Ed, you said this, and I did what you said, and I went out and made another $150,000. Okay, and I was like, and everyone claps, and she sits down. She's like, make sure you listen to him. So she sits down, and I said, hey, Carolyn, first of all, thank you for the kind words, and also congratulations on the 150,000. I don't remember the number. It was a lot. It was six figures. So I said, but by the way, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. And she stood back up. She goes, yes, you did. And I said, no, I didn't say that. I didn't give you that strategy. In fact, I don't even think that. So I would have never said that. And she said, no, you said it. And she literally says the words again. She said, you said these words and I made $150,000. And now we're in this argument, which is very awkward. And I say, hey, look, congratulations. Everybody claps. She sits down and I keep teaching. Okay. So about 6 months ago, I had this prophet come to me and say, and he said, you're speaking. And as you speak, the Lord is taking the words that you say and he's changing them on the way into people's ears. And as people listen, each person in the audience is receiving a very tailored word from what you're saying. They're hearing things in their own language.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I started getting goosebumps and I realized, remember when I asked God, I said, God, I want to speak. I thought what that meant was I would be like, as the president, I would be speaking and the Greek person would hear in their language and the Russian guy would hear in his language. What God did was he tailor-made an answer to that prayer. He
Wow.
tailor-made it for my specific application. I communicate publicly. And what God did was he gave me this gift. Okay, this is so cool. And by the way, I've had this gift confirmed by like Patricia King, folks like that. God gave me this gift where I speak and everyone hears the message that God wants them to hear. And if there's 150 people in the room, 150 people will hear a custom tailor-made thing. Now think about this for a second. How cool of a gift is that, first of all? Second, it's what I asked him for on the impossible list. And
Yeah.
third, he changed, he didn't give it exactly the way I had pictured it. He gave it to me better. It's better. It's way better. It's like I can stand on my head and cluck like a chicken for 10 minutes and God will be like delivering people their own, special message. And so, I'm not going to stand up. We're doing an event together, by the way, beginning of October. We'll talk about this in a second. It's called Hub Nation. It's in Bend, and you should come. And I'll be there, and Chris Valentin will be there, and Bobby will be there, and Chris will be there, and their amazing team will be there. And you need to come. And just so you know, when you show up in Bend, I'm not sure I'm speaking the first day or the second day or both, but when you show up at Bend, I will not stand on my head and cluck like a chicken. Okay, I'm going to teach some stuff. But when you get there, what you're going to hear might not be what I say. What you hear may be what God has for you.
Come on.
And you're welcome to credit me with the success when it comes to credit God too. But anyway. So the point here is when God says it to you, hold on to it long enough to be able to train your mind to be able to receive it, to be able to get the result. I'm going to sit down now because I think we're going to talk about this event. But
Totally.
I thought that was a fun little story.
Yeah. So the real question, Ed, the real question is cape or no cape? Because another one of those things you said is you were going to fly without an airplane or wings or an engine of any sort. So the question is cape or no cape?
Or spacesuit. Maybe it'll just be a spacesuit.
Spacesuit.
You know?
I personally would go no cape. I feel like capes are a bad idea, but worked for Superman, but I don't know. No, Ed, that is so powerful. And one of the things that I was hearing as you were saying that is a lot of people will hear something from the Lord. They'll get a word from someone and it'll be legitimate. It'll be a completely real word from the Lord, but they will take it and they will look at the word, so to speak, through their glasses of their life, their context, their life experience. And they'll go, oh, well, I know what that means. That means this, and this, and this. And then the reality is that isn't what the word meant, but we're sure that it did because it lines up like logically from our own experience. So it's kind of like if I say, so Ed is an F-18 fighter pilot, and I actually am a private pilot. So if someone says to me, Chris, when you were flying your plane really fast, uh, how fast was that? And I'll be like, oh, dude, that was like 150 knots, dude. And if someone says, hey, Ed, when you were flying your plane really fast, how fast does that mean to you, Ed?
1,000 miles an hour.
Okay, so the difference between like let's say 160 miles an hour and 1,000 miles an hour. Now, to in the context, it's it's both really fast,
Fast. Yeah. Yeah.
very fast, but it's just different depending on the life experience and everything. So if God says, "Hey, you're going to fly," or you're asking God, "Hey, can you create a situation where I fly?" And God's like, "You know what? Yes." If we're like, oh, like Superman because we watched the Superman movie, but that's not what God had in mind. and then it doesn't happen that way and we get angry at God, that's the thing that we can't do. And I feel like what you're saying, Ed, is super important, that people don't try to judge what God has done or not done, or blessed or not blessed, but based on your own limited understanding. Because to me, 1,000 miles an hour in the plane that I fly, the plane would fall apart. It's not possible. So it's like, this is where this whole, well, what if what God's asking is the impossible? But it's not impossible with God, but it feels impossible to us. So we discount it, and we're just going to not do it. Because, like, obviously, you can't fly 1,000 miles an hour. That's crazy. Well, you can in Ed's plane. You can in an F-18. So, anyways, I feel like this is very important, because we way too often put our own understanding on things, and we can't do that. We just cannot do that. Bobby, you're muted.
Yeah.
You're muted, Bobby.
This download that I'm getting while you're talking, Ed, from going, mind, skill, and results. And I'm thinking, hey, there's so many people that are developing skill and they're wanting to take this to results. As an apostolic resource center, there's all kinds of leaders that come to Eagle Mountain, as you mentioned, Ed. And I love that they want to speak at our conferences, and I love to hang out with them and just enjoy relationships. But my wife's a strategist, and they all want to have an hour with Becky. And Becky always asks me this question whenever I come into her office or into the house and I'm not sure what to do next. And I'm a bit of a strategist too. And so, often I get stumped and I don't have the next step. And she'll always ask me this question: Bobby, if you knew what to do next, what would that be? I'm like, well, that's why I'm coming to you. And she goes, no, literally, if you were, because we are super good at helping someone else with the actual answer that we could apply to ourselves. And so
Totally.
I just want to encourage you in the place between skill and results. You've got to start somewhere, but before you start somewhere, put it down on paper. Run it by someone who's doing what you want to do. They don't have to be doing the exact thing that you want to be doing, but they have to be successful so that you can use them as a model or a jumping off point for next steps. Have them listen to your Prezi, or just watch what you want to do, share your vision with them, and have them give you next steps so that you can put apostolic feet to prophetic hope. That's the thing. We just stay around and we become sort of perpetual students, because we're not sure if we can step out. And the biggest thing for you is to get a small win right away.
Yeah,
really
man,
good.
that's so good. That is so good. So as we're thinking about this, and one of the things I'm very excited about, Ed mentioned it a couple of times, is this event that's coming up, Hub Nation. And we did want to take just a couple of minutes and chat about that. So this event that's coming up, Hub Nation, something that Eagle Mountain has done for many years now. And this year, I feel like we're kind of taking it to a whole new level. So if you've ever attended in the past, first of all, thank you, but expect this to just be unbelievable. Chris Valton's going to be there. Ed Rush is going to be there. Eamon Ross is going to be there in person. All those guys are going to be there in person. Bobby and I will be there in person. There might be someone else as well, but we're also going to have several other amazing speakers. But we're really going to be going after this convergence of prophetic understanding, hearing from the Lord, and practical application, and communication, and how the technology space converge. Because I feel like the church, it's interesting, we talk about Elon Musk, right? Like, I think the church is really afraid of certain types of things. And I think God's calling us to stop being afraid. We're not supposed to have fear, right? So this is an exciting event. And Ed, I know you're excited to come and be there. So, I mean, from your perspective, why is this even important right now?
Yes, cool. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be there. Like I said, I just had met with Chris Valentin last Friday, just a few days ago, doing a podcast at his studio. Truly an incredible guy. If you ever listened to Chris before, it's just like wisdom bomb after wisdom bomb. And I'll just say there are very few people. There are very few. I mean, I do this for a living. I've been speaking for 15 years, teaching at events, and there are to this day very few people whose messages impress me. And Chris is one of those people. So you want to be there to listen to Chris live. And the cool thing is, I mean, this is all in person stuff. So the world shut down in 2020. We all went digital, like we're kind of doing now. There is nothing like, and I know there's a streaming option. There is nothing like being at an event like this where you can actually meet the folks. And when it comes to events like this, I think if I remember correctly, it's October 6th and 7th. I block off those days. I'm in that event room most of the time. Not all the time. I might go for like a hike or something like that on Saturday. But for the most part, I'm there because I'm there for not only to listen to the speakers, but also for the conversations on the break. There are people whose lives are transformed by simple conversations, an opportunity to pray for you, hear from God specific about business or money. And it's going to be awesome. By the way, another one of the speakers is one of my best friends, a guy named Eamon Ross. If you don't know Eamon, he's legitimately one of the most influential political minds in our time. There are governors who are governors now because of Eamon Ross. So he's a little bit of a behind the scenes guy. You might not have heard of him before. He runs an organization called Kingdom of Politics. And if leadership is on your mind, if you desire to potentially be in leadership, or you want to just be an encourager or a person who prays for folks in leadership, do that. Let me just say, I was joking when I said, I could stand on my head and cluck like a chicken for 5 or 10 minutes and you'd still get the message. The truth is, you could come to an event like this and all of the speakers could stand on their head and cluck like chickens for 2 days, and you would have the value of an event like this just by being there. There are times when you just need to warm your coal up next to some other people who are burning hot. And I'll do this a lot at my events where I'll ask people halfway through the event, I'll say, do you feel a lot better than when you walked in here? You will feel a lot better. The world is a dark place right now, and the media is bombarding. There's legitimately, I don't have time to teach this, there's legitimately a mind virus being transmitted through the news media right now, through social media right now. And the way to counter the mind virus is, number one, to spend time with the Lord in his word and in prayer. And number two, those are three things I know. Number two, to spend time with his people. And I don't know about you, but it's very hard for me to find like-minded people like in everyday life. They're few and far between. And this is a room full of people like you. It's worth doing it. So I saw that in chat. There's a link that just popped up there. If I can copy this, I'll put it on my YouTube as well. But you should attend the event, and I'm going to give a cool little bonus to those who decide to do it now. So go ahead, Chris or Bobby, jump in.
Yeah. So, Bobby, thoughts on Hub Nation specifically, and Ed, I did create a code called Rush. And if they use that code in the next, by midnight tonight, then we'll have a list of people.
So you want them to use the coupon code RUSH.
Yep, use the code RUSH.
Is there like a short link or something? I see that was in chat, but it's not showing up on my YouTube channel. How do people find it? Is there like a quick way to do that?
Yeah, if you go to kingdomlearning.life and click on events, you can find it there. But I will put one in the private chat you can copy right now.
Well, that would be great.
Because I don't have access to yours. You guys are getting real behind the scenes. While we're doing this, Bobby, what are your thoughts?
Oh, here we go. All right, here we go. Kingdomlearning.life. So when you go to this thing, we didn't prepare this ahead of time. Here it is. Okay, so 2 ways to attend, digital and in person. Here's what I'm going to do. 2 things. Oh, man, you got a lineup here. Oh, Shay Bynes is coming too? I didn't see that. That's awesome. Shay's amazing. And Dave Hodgson as well. Yep. Man, you guys got an incredible lineup. So here's the deal. I've never given this away. I don't plan to do it in the future. But when you register today, this is just my deal with you. So I have a series of audios that are free and they're available online that are called God Talks. Put your headphone on, have a conversation with God. I have a set though that are behind a paywall. And that series is called Acres of Gold. It's a 5-day series that it's a conversation with God using a visual illustration that God gave me to be able to ask God where your money barriers and blocks are, and then together you and the Lord remove them. It goes for 5 days. It's 20 minutes a day for 5 days. I think it's actually 15 minutes a day for 5 days. All of those 5 audios are behind a paywall. So they're currently not available publicly like those first 7 ones that I do for God Talk. So anyone who registers today, and Chris will give me the list, we'll email you those 5 files. Literally, we'll just send you the audios, the MP3s. You can use them however you want to. I would just ask that you don't post them online anywhere because it's like my little insider gift to you, but use them for yourself. They're amazing. I've never seen anything like this that so quickly reveals what's in your way when it comes to money and helps you get it out of the way. And that's my gift for you. But you're going to have to enroll by today. So here's the deal. Enroll now, come to the event. And if like you find out later, let's say you enroll to attend live, you find out later, oh man, I got like, a wedding that weekend. Well, then just switch to the digital, like
Yep.
you're covered, you know what I'm saying? So like enroll to come, you should come live if you can. Make it to Bend. By the way, Bend is not an easy place to come to. That's a benefit for you. When you pick yourself up and go someplace that might take a flight or two to get in, you're telling your subconscious mind this is important. Okay. So
Yeah.
the travel actually is a benefit for you. You're going to be pulling away from your life and business and focusing on something that's important for you. Look at that, man. That's an early picture of
Grab the speakers. Yeah. Grab the speakers.
me. So, all right,
And
cool.
for those of you who are thinking about takeaways, Kingdom Coalition is what we're going after. What does that mean? That's the collaboration that equals multiplication. There's just going to be moments that your next depends on who you're going to collaborate with. And so our goal is just to provide an atmosphere for that kingdom collaboration. And also we're going after the prophetic meets technology. We need to have these discussions on how AI and the prophetic tag team together. What's God saying for the next? We need to have these discussions on making sure that we're leading instead of lagging. And so we've got Ryan Collins from Bethel Tech. We're having the technology meets the prophetic discussion. And so you need to get here. You need to be a part of it online. And because we're going to try to push the envelope and have some discussions, release some training and equipping for how we can lead this new era, what's about to happen.
Yeah. It's going to be good. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And if you're coming either digitally or in person, put in the comments, I'm in. That actually is that bit of a testimony. It actually helps other people like, oh man, I don't know. Fall is really busy for me. But those confirmations actually help other people see. You definitely want to use the code at checkout, RUSH, RUSH at checkout.
Yeah.
Here we can get Ed
I
the
can see
full
the bonus.
buddy. It'd be super good.
Same price, you just get the cool bonus. All
Same
right.
price, cool bonus.
Let's
You
do
guys,
it.
Ed, thank you again so much for just pouring in. This is like normal, like every one we've done. It's just amazing amount of information. So if you're just tuning into this, you need to like try to scrub back to the beginning. I don't know if we're going to even have a replay, but see if you can watch the whole thing because you do not want to miss it. And if you're excited about what's happening, put in the comments, I'm in, and we want to see you at Hub Nation. In person is going to be amazing off the hook. Online digital is an amazing experience as well. We've got a lot of things that we're doing to kind of bridge those two audiences. So for sure you want to try and attend live, but if you can't, like Ed mentioned, you get the replay access as well. So it's going to be fantastic. Ed, again, thank you as always. Bobby, thank you. This has been a fantastic podcast. And I'm pumped, man. I am pumped to see you coming up really soon, Ed.
Yeah, it's gonna be like less than a month. It's gonna be awesome.
Less
Or
than a month.
literally a month from today. So all right, blessings, guys. And may God bless you as you're listening today with a 3-time mind expansion. Jesus' name.
Come on.
Amen.
All right.
All right.
See you around.